tonight, rather than asking what these works mean, I want us to ask something else. What does it mean to speak through material today? Maybe we can talk a little bit, Shui, about the question of perception in your work. So maybe you can talk to us a little bit about, what's the difference in your work between representation and perception?
I think perception is more of a mode of sensing or seeing, and I'm interested in this kind of productive friction between the two, between representation, when it breaks down, when it becomes clear, and then when it becomes pixelized, and then it kind of dissolves. And that's where perception comes in. It really is about the way that you kind of modulate your senses.
So maybe, Klára, in this case, when we talk about image making, specifically in your work, we cannot not think about a lineage that your work could be seen as emanating from or sitting in. The fact that embroidery is an art form that in many, many traditional contexts has yielded a lot of abstract patterns and geometric patterns and not necessarily, deeply crafted figurative images. And here you are kind of like switching it in two ways. On one hand, you are using it as a form of creating figurative imagery that we see and read as an image of a body, of a place, of an action, and you're going for monumentality. So you're doing two things in reverse as well. Can you talk to us about how that process has evolved, and what is it that you want to do with that kind of approach to embroidery?
As you said, the embroidery is still as something very like a domestic, It could be that I have a huge studio because I am working on such ambitious things, but actually not, I am still working from home, and I have a little room where I am working daily on embroideries. But this is, for me, still very important to do it by myself, because I really have to be so close to things I am doing and to feel calm, and sometimes it's very hard, especially when I'm working on this like monumental installation. So it's sometimes hard to like stop and to really be very focused and to be just with myself, without anybody else, and enjoying that process. So I did huge canvases, but I decided this is probably not something for me, because I always felt such a big pressure on the results, that the painting should be good, because that's the fine art. But then I realized that I have to do something what is not connect so much with the pressure on results, that it should be art, but maybe I should start with something what is like applied art, and then I will maybe feel more freedom there. I just started to use it very intuitively. And I found on it that this is the way where I feel safe and where I am enjoying process without like any pressure on myself,
There are many cultures where dreams become a way that, certain forms of knowledge are manifested and then transmitted. What are dreams for you, and how have they shaped the way this work has come to exist?
What I've been thinking about studying kind of dreams was about the sort of Western kind of approach to the dream as a sort of psychological problem versus a lot of other cultural kind of approaches to it, including indigenous ones that see the dream as a form of intelligence. So I've been sort of exploring that dream space to try and understand what is the language and sort of lexicon that emerges from there. And I think what I found was something that was so in parallel to kind of my research with AI and other forms of kind of image generation, and in the ways that, data was sort of shuffled and reconstructed, recalibrated. I mean, if you think about a data set in the context of something like machine learning, it's already a sort of fixed data set with new inputs, but the dream space is so much more interesting to me because it's part of this deeper collective consciousness that we're all connected to. I think our perception is kind of how we choose to read our dreams, or how much we choose to value the information that's embedded there. A lot of those kind of present themselves as images, and but also in that space there's no kind of distinction between emotion and representation, or atmosphere or feeling. And I think that was what was really interesting as a framework for me to start to begin to build the paintings with. There's these kind of multiple layers and collaging of different dimensions.
When you're installing an exhibition, when you're working with your sculptures, with your different elements, obviously you're working in a three-dimensional space. How do you make decisions knowing that a body, a living body, is going to enter into that environment? And to what extent are you thinking about that experience, and how do you want to edit our experience of your work in that space?
Yeah, I think about this a lot. I loved when they can discover whatever they want. I am just giving them like freedom to be there, to feel the experience with the space. That's why it's maybe everything in such a big detail, and why, I am working with the sound. I have a different layers in my work. So sometimes I don't like speak about it a lot, but I like much more when people can have an experience with that and find their own way how to read it, I think you don't have to know like everything about art, but you can still read it in your own way.
There is also a composition that goes into how you install the different elements, knowing that people are going to experience it first from this angle or the other angle. So to what extent, what is the main objective here when you're thinking? Is it that the tableau, the actual finished image, needs to be something you're happy with, or are you equally thinking about how the visitor is going to encounter these elements? Is it like a negotiation between the two?
I'm drawing a lot on the beginning, how whole installation or should looks like, and the drawings are very similar as its final installation. Even when I'm working with the spaces with Hamburger Bahnhof or this one, like monumental spaces, for me it's very important if you can be lost in the installation, if you can be hidden somewhere, that you can be just next to artworks with yourself without that feeling that someone is observing you from all sides.
So tell us a little bit about how did you decide on placing the elements in this particular space? When you first knew that was going to be the space of your exhibition?
The first idea I had with the space was to kind of slice it and kind of cut out part of the wall and kind of bring in some light. I was kind of fascinated how there was no windows in the building. And so much of my work thinks about light and the history of it, from the history of the way that light has been implemented and operationalized, beginning with like a sort of stone alabaster window all the way up to the digital screen. And so I think a lot about how the ways that we kind of have manipulated light as a way to sort of separate us from natural light. There's this kind of back and forth between artificial and natural light. And so that was a really important element or intervention to the space. And then I think from there, the works just fell in place.
You have two artists here that are still very, very conventional in that sense, that they do touch their own work. They love making things. Although, when I look at the materiality that you each use, one could think that you're from very different generations, even though you're a very, very similar age. One is working with LED bringing in algorithms, you know, and digital, those kind of aluminum sheets that have a certain sterility or a certain coldness to them, or reflecting light in a very different way. In your case, we go into, you know, hemp and flax, we go into thread, we go into cotton, we go into stone, something that feels much more organic or coming directly from nature. What is the role of materiality in your work? Clearly, it's a very big one.
Yeah, I am always using the materials very intuitively, and it's always depend with which spaces I'm working. So, for example, in a Hamburger Bahnhof, you know, that's the huge hall full of like very heavy metal, and it's to me, very masculine architecture, and I felt that I have to bring there something very fragile, you know, something what can disappear with nature. When I saw this space for first time, and there is a very strong architecture on the ceilings, you know, it's very central, but on the other hand, you know, even when you are standing on the beginning of the gallery, you feel that the gallery is so long, you know, and even the ceilings are 5 meters, you have a feeling that they are very low. So I try to divide it through of the poles, you know, and try to respect more the centrality of the architecture and the geometry of the lights, and bring more attention inside of the gallery, and create some kind of maybe laboratory or some space where you can growing these mycelium objects, because they will still growing during the show, and more like experiment with the space in different ways than I did before.
I would say it's intuitive too, but I did read this book probably like 6 years ago about the physics of light, and it was talking about the sort of refractive wave index of different materials. And it got me really interested in metal because of its range of refraction. That's kind of how I started working on the aluminum, thinking about a material that had a light that was already embedded or inside of it. And so that kind of led to the process of etching on the metal to release that light or to amplify it, and then painting on it as a way to modulate it, and then having this push and pull.